Hey y'all, Miss Mayhew here, and I'm going to go over some cladogram practice with you guys. Now, this is a practice example, so it would probably suit you to pause in between each step before I give you the answer. That way you can kind of test yourself out and see how you're doing on your own. So the first step is to identify your outgroup. Okay, this is the organism that has the least in common with all the other organisms. This one is going to go by itself on the branch that's connected closest to the common ancestor as possible. Okay, this organism we consider the oldest. So looking at my data table over here, I can see that I have a bunch of different organisms or species over here on the left. At the top, I have a bunch of different organelles or molecules that are present or not present in these organisms. So looking at that, I'm trying to find which organism has the least in common with the rest of them. In this case, it's going to be the Omicron organism. Looking at my table, I can see that it does not have a single one of these items listed, so I'm going to say that this is my outgroup. Now, the second step is when you're building a cladogram, kind of like this one that has physical characteristics, a good helpful tip is to add up the number of organisms that have each of the characteristics and use that to help you build your tree. This can kind of be used to help determine what characteristics cause each of the branches and will help you arrange your organisms accordingly. So I'm going to go through and count how many organisms in each column have that characteristic. The next step is to find your most related pair. Okay, these are the ones that have the fewest number of differences or the most similarities. These two are going to be placed next to each other on the tree, so at the tiniest branch where it's most closely related. So take a second and figure out which two species are most closely related and put them on the tree. In this case, the two that are most closely related are the tau and epsilon species. Okay, if you look at this table, you can see that they have in common every single row. They both have DNA, both have ribosomes, both have a nucleus, both have chloroplast, and both have a mitochondria. So these two are going to go on my two closely related branches at the very end. Now that we have our most closely related organisms and our outgroup labeled, we can go through and get the middle filled out. Now the way that we do that is by placing the characteristics on the tree itself to make sure that the organisms are in the right spot. Okay, so for example, my tau and my epsilon, the one thing that they have different from everything else is the chloroplast. So I'm going to add that on the tree right there. This step is where counting up how many organisms or species have each characteristic, this is where that comes in handy. So I can see that my chloroplast, to the right, there's only 2 species that have that. I can also see that my DNA, the one that has the most of the organisms in it, has 5 of them. The only one that doesn't is Omicron. So to the left, where I have my Omicron, is not going to have DNA. Everything past that is. So I'm going to add DNA onto the tree right there. So I can see that to the right of where I've placed my DNA is gained, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different species. My next one is ribosomes. So there are only 4 species that have ribosomes. So I'm going to place my ribosome on the tree where there are only 4 species that branch after it. So I can see that everything to the left does not have a ribosome, and the 4 to the right do have ribosomes. So now, using my table, I can figure out what that branch is to the left that doesn't have ribosomes other than Omicron. Looking at my table, I can see that that is the alpha species. So I'm just going to add that onto my tree. Now the next one I have is the nucleus and the mitochondria both have 3 species that contain them. So I'm going to add both nucleus and mitochondria on my tree where there are 3 organisms to the right. Now I can use that same thought process that I did earlier and figure out which species does not have the nucleus, mitochondria, and chloroplast, but does have ribosomes and DNA. Looking at my table, I can see that my gamma species has DNA, has ribosomes, but no nucleus or mitochondria or chloroplast. So I'm going to place that species on the tree. Now for my last one, I'm looking for the species that does have DNA, ribosomes, nucleus, mitochondria, but not the chloroplast. So looking at my table, I can see that that is lambda. So that's it, easy peasy. Hopefully you guys were able to do this. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher. That's it for now. Bye.